All right. The floor is open. Anybody would either raise their hand or like to unmute? Looks like Richie has unmuted. Go ahead, Richie.
Hey, Mark.
Hi.
You've said
Let me put
you've said
so I can really there.
said a few things that's really touched me. One was when we were doing the meditation, and you spoke about giving something about letting your breath be in the spaciousness, and that sort of gave me a different perspective on not focusing on the breath, but just having the breath be doing its thing, and being in the in consciousness, and in awareness, and that was really helpful for me, and the overall meditation was. And you also spoke about allowing the silence to be there, to let your heart hear itself, essentially, be heard. And and about being out in nature. And I always think, we're so lucky, those of us who've chosen to live in a place where you can step outside and it's quiet. And you can.
Right, that instruction wouldn't work as well in certain places.
Yeah, and you're not far from the water and I always part of my meditation is to know the vastness of the sky, and that the sky has all these messages for me about grace and spaciousness and vastness. When right after last week, the next morning, I found myself between appointments, 2 medical appointments, one for my dog, one for me, and I was really anxious about getting to the second appointment, getting from Montague to Greenfield, and somehow in my exuberance for being on time and even early for this medical appointment, I got ahead of myself, and I was like a whole half hour. I lost the fact that I was a whole half hour ahead of myself, and I was frantic. I was like driving, running, and like, oh my God, I'm going to be late and everything. And then as I was driving, I suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute, it's not a quarter after 10, it's a quarter of 10. So I have a whole extra half hour. And it was like in that moment, I suddenly like, oh, okay, I can relax. And it was, so I realized in that moment that time and the schedules that we put upon ourselves is one of those constraints that we just live by sometimes, especially if you're working, if you've got appointments and things, and that time is really an illusion. And I remember saying after COVID, people would say that you could apologize for being late to an appointment. I would say there's no such thing as being late anymore, and somehow I've fallen back to thinking that some things really are important. Of course, being retired, it's nice to realize that time is just there. So even though I'm getting closer to the end, right? But still, racing to do things, when you take that away, and it's like, oh, that's right, I can breathe. And so that was what came to me this week, along with the importance of getting away from the news and just turning it off and gazing.
All right. So thank you, Richie. Just to remind us all of that construction of time that we live in and how that can create the illusion, of having no space can be one of the ways that we kind of cramp up is around time and being there on time and not having enough time. How often have people said that they don't have enough time? And so forth. And of course, it's a little easier when you're retired, I do have to say. But
and yet we
retired
waste
people who manage to fill up every single moment, too, and not have enough time.
And yet I realize how much time I waste by staring at, social media or whatever it is. And then I step back and say, oh, I could have had that half hour, if I just didn't lose myself in this inane non-reality.
Yeah. All right. And I also wanted to just underline too what you said before about the meditation instruction. And what you described is exactly what I hoped would happen to people when they sort of become the space of awareness and let the breath just be and happen of its own. And, kind of happening in that space. So it's a different experience of doing breathing as meditation. So thanks. All right. Who else might want to check in and say what you noticed this week or say what you noticed tonight? So Laura.
Hi. So without going into all the details, I'll just report that the universe sent me a pretty horrible week in so many different realms that it became sort of like a pile up of things that was so overwhelming. And I'll include the state of the world as sort of the energy that's there as well. That's so uncomfortable right now. Kind of pushing me more towards trauma brain, and I really found myself in trauma brain a couple of times, just because of events that were happening that are all going to be fine, but was just like a pile up of really upsetting things. And I was like, okay, this is my opportunity to do my homework. And I, tried to tune into my heart, and I'm usually thinking about my brain. I'm in trauma brain and, cortisol and this and that. But I was like, my heart was literally clenching. Like I could feel the restriction and the clenching. And it was just so stark. Like, okay, this is, out of the ordinary levels of stress. And this is what it feels like. And probably when I have a little less stress, it's maybe more subtle. But it was, I would say I got an A+ in the homework.
Yes, you got an A+ in the homework.
Because I had such a terrible week that I got to practice observing. Yes.
Did you notice anything happen when you turned toward your heart and felt how clenched it was?
I have a pretty robust self-compassion practice, so I'm always sprinkling a little compassion, a little bit of just like, this is suffering and this is compassion. So a little bit of that, but I think it was so elevated that it would take a long time for it to clench. Whereas I think if it was just like a normal everyday stress, turning my attention to it, I could imagine it softening. There's interesting.
The body takes a long time, especially when it's really in that reactive mode. It takes it a long time to relax.
That's right.
But even for a short while, I think it matters if you can really accompany yourself. Sometimes I say witness yourself, but that seems a little too remote, the witnessing kind of word. I prefer the word accompany. To like accompany your heart when you see that the heart is clenched in fear, in shock, that there's the ability to actually accompany it. And the image that I use that I find helpful is like to put a mental hand on it, on the shoulder of your heart. That doesn't quite make sense. But if you can figure out how to, just that kind of presence where you'd be with someone and you'd put your hand on their shoulder, just to let them know that you're there with them, not just witnessing them, but your heart's really there with them. That you can do that even with your own heart.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hoping to report a better week next Tuesday.
All right. I hope things go better for you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. I may make a note here because at some point I would like to talk about how you can access the back of the heart when the front of the heart is clenched. I gave you a little bit of that tonight, but there's a whole kind of practice I have of that. All right. Who's next? Diane. Go ahead and unmute.
For a few reasons, I've been going through over 30,000 photographs in my computer, sort of cleaning them out a bit, and just thinking about spaciousness in a more literal sense. Like the photographs that I cherish the most are in the places that I love the most, which is Colorado, Arizona, big open spacious places where I just feel comfortable and, hiking out there and feel comfortable and sort of content and wholesome. And it's just wonderful. And I assume that a lot of spaciousness is otherwise is sort of that zooming out. And I found that I guess clenched might be what I would say, or definitely not present. And I think a lot of it is like social anxiety and introversion. I went back and visited the people I used to work with, and there were maybe 10 people there, and everyone's chatting, and I was in the center. And when I left, I was so disappointed, and I didn't even remember much of the conversation. So I think I was thinking that it's so hard to zoom out when you're just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was just one thing I noticed this week.
As one shy person to another, just want to validate, yes, being around a lot of people can be hard. And you put your finger on it, is that you may be kind of overwhelmed with the amount of input that's coming in. Shyness and sensitivity kind of tend to go together. So I don't have a real easy solution for that. The world is not made for shy people, but I kind of like being the way I am. So I don't feel any aversion to it. And sometimes I wish it were more comfortable in social situations. But I also give myself permission to not talk and to be okay with that, to not feel like I have to project, and to find a quiet way to kind of connect with someone. So, I'm sure you have your ways of going through the world and your condition, but I just wanted to just validate that. That's a certain way to be. It comes with sensitivity. Yeah. Who's there next? Virginia.
Hi. So for about the first 3 nights after class, in the mornings, I went outside and took my blanket. And so there were really good things and not so good things. But one thing that was amazing was I was watching the sky, and I don't feel like I saw a shooting star, but 3 different times I was looking at stars and they would start moving slowly across the sky. And it was just amazing. Maybe that's a shooting star. I don't know.
Probably a satellite.
A satellite. Okay.
Satellite. Yeah, this morning was satellite central out there. It just seemed like there were more than ever.
Wow.
But yes, it's totally mesmerizing to watch them move slowly.
Yeah. And the part that was hard was that I have a fear of seeing an animal. Because, like when it snows, there are a lot of tracks in our yard.
It's astonishing, yes.
And we have a small yard. And so I, you know, I got a little bit more comfortable like the next day. Um, I stayed out a little bit longer. I mean, the moon was so beautiful. Like it was just very sweet, not that big. It was really nice to be out there. And then I would come inside and meditate. And I feel like for one of the very first times meditating, I stayed present enough that I saw how much I was thinking. And I finally decided to just say either thinking or planning, whatever I was noticing, and go right back to either doing some body scan or watching the breath going out of my nose. And I mean, this happened like every second. I was shocked at how much I was thinking. But I enjoyed doing the meditation. I mean, it meant a lot to me that I had the wherewithal to just pay attention to that. So I really enjoyed that. And, I'll just say one other thing. At the beginning of before this year began, 2025, I had decided that I really wanted to set an intention for this year. And I set an intention that is called Lead from the Heart. And it's really been interesting because there have been many times where I've been in a conversation and my inclination is to stay kind of superficial a little bit. I'm talking about something, maybe I think I'm being sincere or, sharing stuff about myself. And when I think of my intention, it changes the conversation for me. And that has been a really good practice for me because I kind of drop down and think, what do I really want to say here to this person? And it's been much more meaningful for me. So those are just some of the things that have been going on this week.
Wow, a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
The last thing you spoke about, that's really powerful to actually let your intention lead your speech. It's really powerful. So I'm really happy to hear you're doing that. It's life transforming, really.
It is. Yeah.
And it's supported by what you described your meditation is doing. When you just notice thinking, and thinking, in meditation is usually just like going off on these tangents. It's not the heart speaking to you. It's just blah, blah. Each time you interrupt that with your presence, it creates a little more space in the mind. You're a little less driven by your thoughts. And it makes it more possible for you actually to hear that quiet voice of your heart, or what really matters to say or to do, when those kind of conditioned thoughts in your mind are not quite as dominant, not pressing on you quite so much. And you don't have to worry about, the more or less of it. Just keep doing that, what you did. When the thought arises, just let it go and come back to breathing. Even if you do that 1,000 times in every minute, it's still a really valuable practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing I'll mention, sort of going in reverse order, you're outside. As you were talking about being a little afraid of being outside with the animals, you reminded me of a book I just read, which Catalina gave me. She's not here to thank. I need to thank her for it. It's about a Thai forest monk, Ajahn Giacundo. It's really his autobiography. Most of it is his autobiography. He dictated this toward the end of his life. And in the Thai forest tradition, they would literally go out in forests that had tigers in them and other kind of wild animals that were dangerous. Our equivalent is maybe bears. I suppose coyotes in certain circumstances, but tigers kind of top the charts in my mind as to what I would necessarily want to run into. And he described that some monks would meditate on the paths that they knew that tigers walked. Tigers have these paths in the jungle where there are no human paths. There are nonetheless paths because the animals use paths. And so why would they do this? It really improves your meditation. That sort of being on the edge of death, it has a very strong capacity to sharpen the mind. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that you go meditate on paths that tigers walk on, but there is something about your willingness to step outside, your willingness to be in that discomfort, where I suspect you're safe, but your mind doesn't completely think you are. To be on that edge and to have the courage to be there anyway, it opens something in the mind. It opens this capacity to face things inside of us. And it's a very ancient spiritual tradition, kind of being out there with the animals, putting yourself in danger in some ways. And you're probably doing it in a very reasonable way on, right near your house. But it kind of raises a certain kind of energy that's then helpful for meditation and for life as a whole. That's just what occurred to me to say in light of the lions and tigers and bears that are out there in your yard. Who's ever making all that?
I wondered what the name of the book was.
It's called Gold Beneath Rags. Let's see. It's right here. Gold Wrapped in Rags. And another monk is the author of it, the English translator. What is it? Ajahn Dick Silaramo. Not in a good position to grab the book. And I suspect you're not going to find it on Amazon. But if you Google it, Buddhist books like this are usually free. And it probably would be sent to you by a monastery in Virginia where this translator lives for free. All you do is have to send them for postage and make a donation if you want. And they'd probably send you the book. It's a powerful book. This guy is a character. And what was curious to me is the way that his enlightenment didn't necessarily smooth off the rough edges of his personality. You can kind of see that. And there's something about that that's nice to read. It's sort of like a lot of our personality will stay the same, even as something really becomes freed up in our hearts. So anyway, if you read the book, tell me what you think of it. It's quite an interesting book, and a rare one. I don't know of Thai meditation masters who have talked about their awakening experiences. There are books written by others about monks, kind of collecting stories, but this is his actual voice that you're reading as translated into English.
Good. Thank
All
you,
right.
Mark.
Hey, you're welcome. Didn't know I was going to go there. All right. Who else might want to speak? Jennifer.
Hey, Mark, it's Nick.
It's Nick. All right, Nick.
Um,
Good to see you.
You reminded me of something. I wasn't going to talk about this. It didn't even occur to me at all to talk about it. But before I say what I want to say, it never occurred to me. It's probably different in a lot of ways, but I, in the past, have taken cars to the racetrack, and there's there's a presence that, and it's interesting. I mean, there's adrenaline, but there's also the key is to stay present and calm and relaxed. And it's one of the few places where you're just completely present. But I would not necessarily liken it to meditation. It's a different kind of presence. So anyway.
It's a different kind of presence, yeah.
Yeah. But so on spaciousness, I do this annual silent retreat, and actually before our first spaciousness class, I had just been back, and it's a beautiful monastery-like setting on the bluffs of the Mississippi River. And I have this favorite spot in one of the rooms, the library, and there's a fire going, and you look out over this bluff, and you have the river valley, and the river is very wide there, and then you can see, on the other side, and the dotted farmhouses, and it's a beautiful, picture and setting in the sky, and I'm a very scheduled person. I think of myself as an engaged doer, and then an anxious doer, and then a frantic doer. And, there's different stages of doing. And this is a place where it's 3 days and there's nothing. And it's heavenly, really. And I always think, I want to bring more of that back. And Tuesday before the class, like, my day was so cramped. And so, I got back Sunday, I was in a good place, and, it's like the spaciousness of the time, and then it was just cramped. And it's so important for me, and I talked about this before, to create space between things in my calendar. And I'm also one of these people that I don't like back-to-back meetings and too many people. And, so when that doesn't happen, I feel like this, this just tension. And it was nice, after the class last week, it's, the practice of presence and just the acknowledgement of, the importance of creating that space is helpful. But it's one of those things where, like, I have a great forgetter, and don't always make sure that I create that for myself. So, yeah.
Right. I mean, our conditioning takes over, our habit takes over, and so that great forgetter, I think of that as like the habit just sort of crowds out the intention. You might have a clear intention to create more space in your life, but the habits have a way of kind of just pushing it out like a thicket that grows up there. And so it's really helpful to keep touching in with that intention. That becomes a part of the mindfulness, to know, what it is that you're really trying to do in your life and keep returning to it. And so even just moments of mindfulness in the course of your day create the space for you to remember what's important. Without them, you just don't even remember what's important. The habits just impinge, and the needs and demands of others impinge, and you pick up other people's energy, and all sorts of things start to happen. You lose the center that you are in the middle of experience in that whole scenario. We've come to our time, folks. So I'll send you on your way. Continue to notice what makes you clench and unclench, but also just experiment with the external conditions of space in your life. Okay? And I'll see you next week.